Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my latest video. As you guys probably know, if you've been following along, unless this is your first time watching one of my videos in the lead up to this upcoming NFL season, I am going to be continuing my series of 5 players for you guys to target late in your fantasy football drafts. I've already done the quarterback and the running back position, so if you have not seen that video, please go back and watch those videos so you can hear my thoughts on those 5 players at each position. With that being said, today I'm going to be doing 5 wide receivers that you guys should be targeting late in your fantasy football drafts. Similar to the running back position, the 5 players that I did choose for this video today, they're all outside the half point PPR ADP according to Fantasy Pros. If you guys are unaware, Fantasy Pros collects about 3 or 4 different platforms, and they create an average so you kind of get an idea where these players are going on most platforms in the lead up to your drafts. So these players are all outside the top 36. And one little note too is my first video I did when I came back is I talked about year 3 wide receivers that you should be targeting this year, because that's one of my favorite topics in fantasy football. Because I already spoke about those wide receivers, I did not want to include them in this video. And there is some of those players that are on that video that are outside the top 36, which I would recommending targeting. But I just didn't want to repeat everything I said about those players in this video, so I did choose 5 different new wide receivers to speak about today. With that being said, going into my first wide receiver, he's a second-year wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, just outside the top 36. Right now, he's going as the 37th wide receiver according to Fantasy Pros half-point PPR. He's Romano Dunay for Chicago. The reason why I really like him this year is just because the addition of Ben Johnson at the head coach position, at the head coach spot. We saw what he did with that Detroit offense and how creative he can be, how he can put his best players in positions to succeed and get the production. I kind of think he's going to, Odunze, in my opinion, I think he's going to kind of take over that Amon-Ra St. Brown type of role, because you can line up Odunze in the slot and outside in the boundary. And because of the Johnson's creativity, as I said, I think it's going to lead to more consistent targets for Odunze this year and more production as well, because I think we're going to see a more improved Caleb Williams in his second year, especially under the tutelage of Ben Johnson. Now, as far as where I view Odunze entering the season with his competition for targets, obviously they still have DJ Moore. So I do think DJ Moore is likely going to see the most targets to begin the season, because he does have that contract that he signed last year with them. But if Odunze can be very efficient with his targets and start seeing more consistent production, when we get to that back half of the schedule, I would not be surprised if we start to see more games where Odunze is seeing more targets than a DJ Moore in this offense. Now, he might be capped on his touchdown production. They got Colston Loveland, the tight end, in the first round. They got Cole Kmet, so maybe that's where he kind of has a ceiling capped. But if Johnson does fix this offense, I do think Odunze's talent and the combined with Ben Johnson offers him the potential to be at least a high floor wide receiver too, if this all comes together in Chicago this season. My next wide receiver I'm going to be speaking about, this is a former wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, which I think you can get great value for him right now as a wide receiver 4. It's going to be Stefon Diggs. He signed with New England this offseason. Basically, what New England's hoping what Stefon Diggs can be for Drake May is what Stefon Diggs was. I do apologize about that loud car right out there. But anyways, your New England is hoping what Stefon Diggs will be for Drake May is basically what Stefon Diggs was for Josh Allen. Now, Stefon Diggs, as his level of talent, is going to be the same when he joined the Bills, 5 years ago? Likely not. I mean, he is coming off that torn ACL. But the good news was today it came out that Stefon Diggs is cleared for full participation in training camp. So he's going to be going full go, which is great news ahead of the season. So you don't have to worry about if he's going to be limited by the week 1 game. Since he's been in the league, he has popped up in the stats. If you guys have not watched my videos that I've been mentioning this on my X account at Cody Talks NFL, I do like to collect the production, the stats from the past 3 regular seasons seasons. And even though Diggs did miss a good chunk of last season, he did pop up on some stats for you guys. First of all, he's tied for the now this is among wide receivers only. So this does not include like the tight end position. He's tied for the 8th most receiving touchdowns since 2022. He's tied for the 8th most receiving first downs since 2022. He has the 9th most receptions since 2022. And then what I really like is just his average yards per game. Now, this is a minimum of 17 games, so I do put that minimum in there when I collect this specific stat, so you at least have a full season from a player. And Stefon Diggs actually does have the 9th highest receiving yards per game since 2022. He averages 75.8 yards per game. Now, he's playing in I've talked about this with Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte in my year 3 video that I mentioned earlier, but Stefon Diggs is in a crowded wide receiver room in New England, but because of the contract that they did give him, I totally expect him to be the wide receiver 1 for New England and lead the team in targets. And for you guys, like I mentioned, getting him as a wide receiver 4, he offers the potential to be a high floor wide receiver 2, assuming that he's going to stay healthy this year and Drake May does make that year 2 jump. Moving into my number 3 wide receiver, this is a guy I kind of view as a PPR machine, especially in full PPR leagues. It's going to be Khalil Shakir for the Buffalo Bills. I think he's a high floor bench option for you to have on your bench for the player that can help you out in bye weeks. When the matchup is right, I think he can provide value and you can slide him into your lineups. I think he's going to have games throughout the season where he's going to have the most targets in that Bills passing attack. And if you told me by the end of this season Khalil Shakir had the most targets on the Bills offense, that would not shock me at all, especially considering they did give him a nice contract extension. Now, where you might not get a lot of value out of him, which I will acknowledge, is him just getting the touchdowns, because they got Keon Coleman, they signed Joshua Palmer from the Chargers, they still got Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, and those are those bigger body guys that will take those red zone opportunities when they get closer to the red zone. But the way I do view him entering the season is I do think he's a high floor wide receiver that can provide you a high ceiling outcome when the matchup is right, help you deal with buys, and then if he does see a consistent 7+ targets a game, he's a guy that you can consider putting in your lineups in every single week. My number 4 wide receiver, this is going to be a second year wide receiver, along with a Dunze, is going to be for a first round pick from last year for the San Francisco 49ers and Ricky Pearsall. Now, I do want to note that Ricky Pearsall is starting training camp on the PUP list, but John Lynch came out today and said that that's going to likely be a short-term outcome. And then there's a couple of reasons why I think Pearsall does not only offer you an opportunity to provide you season-long value, but at least I think there's an opportunity where he can at least provide you great value in the first month of the season to the first half of the season, depending on what happens with Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings. Now, let's start with Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, he tore I think he tore more than just his ACL, if I remember right, back in October. Well, John Lynch spoke about that today. What John Lynch said on Brandon Ayuk's recovery, he said the team is encouraged with his recovery, but they are not anywhere close to having a concrete timeline on when he practices. So just so you guys are he's also placed on the PUP list. And if you guys are unaware, if a player remains on the PUP list when they do the final cut down date, that player has to miss at least the first 4 games of the season. So if Ayuk is not ready to go by September, that means Ricky Pearsall has a chance to be the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco for at least the first 4 weeks of the year. And then you got Juwan Jennings, who wants a new contract, and if he doesn't get that new contract, he has requested a trade. So if for any reason they decide that they don't want to give him the contract and they do end up trading Jennings and Ayuk remains on the PUP list, you got Ricky Pearsall, who's not only going to be slide right into the wide receiver 1 for the 49ers, but then you're going to get him probably seeing at least anywhere between the first or second most targets on the offense. Now, of course, they still have George Kittle, who would receive the most targets as well. But I could see them like 1 week being Kittle the most targets, Pearsall being the next week with the most targets until Ayuk's back in the lineup and depending on Jennings' status. And then how I view Pearsall right now entering these drafts, entering the last week of July, is I view him as a potential high ceiling wide receiver 3, which will be dependent on Ayuk and Jennings. I think with him being on your bench, you can play him when the matchup is right. But if Ayuk does struggle to return to full health and Jennings is no longer on the roster, I think Pearsall has the opportunity to work himself up into a high floor wide receiver 2 status. And then moving into my last wide receiver, I'm going with that rookie first round pick for the Packers. What was that? Their first round wide receiver they took since like I think early 2000, so like 2001 or two or something like that. Similar to Diggs, right? But this is a different, not similar to Diggs, but as far as the situation, right? He has plenty of wide receivers in that room. He's going to be competing with targets, right? They got Jaden Reed. We'll have to see where Christian Watson's with his health. Romeo Doubs. They got Dontavian Wicks. They drafted another wide receiver. I forget the kid's name in like the third or fourth round. But because of his speed and his talent, I think he can end up being the true wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Because, as I mentioned, he's got the talent and the ability where you can line him up in the slot and you can line him up on the boundary. And since he has that versatility to do that, that will give Matt LaFleur, their coach, plenty of ways to utilize him in the offense, which means more routes he'll be running and more time he will be spending on the field, where you can hopefully start seeing a consistent targets with him. And then he has that blazing speed, and you combine that with Jordan Love's arm, that can lead to more consistent explosive passing plays for the Packers offense, where he can give you big weeks throughout the year. So how I view him right now with Golden is I do think he's a stash option. I think you would want to draft him to your bench with the understanding that you might not play him in the first 4 games until you kind of get an idea what his role will be with. But as soon as he would show any chemistry with Love and start seeing those at least 7+ targets a week, I think he would end up moving into a high ceiling wide receiver 2. Throughout the rest of the season once that happens. But again, you might have to be very patient with Golden, but I think it will at least pay off in the second half of the schedule. So yeah, those are my top 5 wide receivers I'm targeting late in my fantasy football drafts. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. Make sure you do subscribe and follow me on all my social media platforms. In the next video, I'll be wrapping up this series. Will be on the tight end position. I'm shooting to actually get this out to you guys tomorrow night. It might be Thursday night, but I'm going to try to get it in tomorrow night because if you guys aren't aware, I'm going to be unavailable this weekend. Got to go to a funeral. So I kind of want to get this all wrapped up so I can get everything ready for me leaving to Georgia on Thursday night. But you'll at least get the tight end video by Thursday night. So I'll at least talk to you guys soon. Peace out.